Senior Bowl weekend is upon us. It's been a week of practices with the Steelers on hand, as well as several reporters who were in Mobile, Alabama, watching things play out, the practices, the talking, the meeting, all the behind the scenes stuff. And there's been notes that we've been able to pick through on who the Steelers are looking at the most. And hint, it's the quarterbacks. No surprise there, but there are some quarterbacks that are emerging as the guys that the Steelers are hinting heavily towards. We'll talk about them as well as some offensive linemen that you should keep your eyes on in the Senior Bowl this upcoming weekend. I say I'm joined by Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. I'm Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Hit the like button on this video. If you're watching it on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our daily content. We thank you for making us your first podcast listen every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app today and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank of gas after you download the app. Joining me today on the Friday episode, as always, our friend, our colleague, our buddy, Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, how you doing?
I love that intro. That might have been my favorite one we've done up to this point, Chris. I am doing wonderfully. It's a bit of a crazy week getting ready and getting set for the Super Bowl, but lots of exciting things ahead, and definitely an exciting week in the football world. No doubt about that.
No doubt about that. We talked about the coaching situation that's going across the NFL, the Rooney Rule situation. We've talked about, all the coaching switches that are happening. It's been a long week with that. But during that whole time, down in Mobile, Alabama, are one of the earlier stages of, we're about to hit real draft talk season. I haven't spent too much time on draft talk yet because I usually wait until after the Super Bowl for Locked On Steelers to turn that up. But Senior Bowl weekend is something we cannot ignore because it is a big event. It's the opportunity, not necessarily just for the game to be played, because the game itself and the practices, that's time to get evaluate guys a little bit closer for the coaches that are there. But it's also about the guys it's also about the conversations that they get to have. Yep. This is the times when the families of those players that are in Senior Bowl, they'll go down to Mobile, Alabama. There's a lot of networking that goes on. This is where a lot of these coaches get to know, okay, if I want to bring this guy into my organization, if I want him to join the team, who is this person? And Jenna, two guys that have specifically emerged in these conversations that the Steelers have been having are two quarterbacks that we've heard a lot about. One being Kenny Pickett, University of Pittsburgh, Heisman candidate, finished third in the Heisman Trophy voting. You've heard me talk a lot about him on this podcast. And Malik Willis, the quarterback from Liberty, who looks to be the guy with maybe the best combination of speed to arm power of this draft class. And Jenna, we've talked about this class maybe not being the best quarterback class that's come out recently, but there are certainly guys that the Steelers are taking looks at, and this is the year of all years to start looking at quarterbacks now that Ben Roethlisberger isn't coming back.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It was actually hilarious. I have a friend that works at ESPN who we were out on a shoot earlier this week, and he gave me a phone call. He's down covering the Senior Bowl in Mobile. So he called me and I couldn't answer the phone. So I texted him. I was like, hey, what's up? Is everything okay? How are you? He's like, oh yeah, I'm at the Senior Bowl. And I completely forgot he was there. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. He goes, I have a Steelers scoop for you. And I was like, do you? Like, all right, what's going on here? And he goes, well, there's a ton of Steelers brass down there, which we can talk to because, it seems like it's everybody down there from a lot of the pictures and the reports that we're seeing. Not only is it Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert, it's Matt Canada, it's Art Rooney II, it's Mike Sullivan, quarterbacks coach. There's a lot of guys that are down there representing the Steelers, trying to learn who these guys are and talk to these guys. But back to the phone call I got. he's like, I have a Steelers scoop for you. And I was like, oh, like hit me, thinking it's going to be some insider piece of information. He's like, they are spending so much time with the quarterbacks. I'm like, yeah, yes, they are.
Scooped. He got him.
There it is. I'm like, that would make a whole lot of sense. Of course it would, because logically, that is going to be the case. But so it's no secret in that way that the Steelers have their eyes and they're looking at these guys. They're really trying to figure out, because we've talked about this, and I feel like all the conversations this offseason, what direction are they going to go when it comes to who they're going to get at the quarterback? And no better time than now to really assess some of these guys like Kenny Pickett and like Malik Willis. I mean, the nice thing is, and we talked about this too a little bit, but with Kenny Pickett, they've had the advantage because Pitt and the Steelers train at the same facility. So they've been able to really see Kenny Pickett. And I feel like there were some days, during practices when Pitt was on the field where, we would see some of the Steelers folk around, paying close attention to this, keeping an eye on it. Kevin Colbert was in the press box when Pitt played UNC, when it was Kenny Pickett versus Sam Howell. So it's no secret in that sense, but this is that opportunity to kind of really, like you said, get to know these guys, see who they are, talk to, again, they've had conversations with Kenny Pickett, I'm sure, and I'm sure there's been some with Malik Willis, but now you get to see these guys up close and personal. You get to kind of get the feel for who they are and kind of start that process, because we're going to blink and it's going to be April and the draft is going to be right here.
Exactly. It moves really fast. But again, these processes began a long time ago. This is why, like, when people say, like, oh, Kevin Colbert, if he's leaving after this year, why is he doing anything with the draft? It's like, because the draft process has been ongoing. Like you said, that Pitt versus North Carolina game that you're talking about, that happened in November. So that was just them getting an in-person look at guys that they've been paying attention to. By the way, I need them to I need Pitt to get more games where their quarterback is up against another quarterback the Steelers are looking at, because that was the best food that we ate covering a Pitt game all season.
Oh, yes. That press box food that night was delicious.
It was on point.
Yeah. Although I will say, and I don't know if I mentioned this, LA, that press box at SoFi Stadium, that was by far, I know we're going on a little tangent here, the greatest press box food I have ever had in my entire life. And I'm stalling a little bit to pull up a picture. My goodness, holy smokes. That was, here it is. Here's the photo for all of our viewers. We had like chicken skewers and Asian short ribs and kimchi fried rice and some like Thai-inspired salad. They had, again, I know this is the information that people really came here to the podcast for, so you're welcome, everybody. They had, it felt like you were walking into like a gas station. They had like all of these like prepackaged like grapes and crackers and cheese and fruit and granola bars and ice cream and Kit Kats and everything. It was magical. Can you tell I miss it? Can you tell I want to go back?
No, I can't tell at all. It sounds like you were in total distress, and I feel really bad that you have to go back and experience that again for a Super Bowl. Like wow.
Really.
Jenna, it's so horrible what happens to you in this sporting business. I think that WPXI needs to do better and send me to SoFi. I'll suffer and eat the food.
Honestly, we could use more analysts. I wouldn't hate it. But I'm glad people enjoy that little tangent. But in terms of quarterbacks, obviously, of course they're going to have their eyes on these guys. And of course that this is, they're exploring all avenues. And this is the Steelers doing just that. They're doing that due diligence. They want to know every little thing about these guys, any red flags that might pop up, any sort of, this is that pre-draft process, like you said, that's really been in the works for a long time here.
It has been. And I want to talk more about the process right now and the things that we are knowing of as going into the Senior Bowl that the Steelers are taking a look at. We're sticking with the quarterback position for another segment. We will talk about some of the offensive linemen coming up. But first, got to talk to you guys about Get Upside. Hey, Steelers fans, this is Chris Carter with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. My listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use promo code TOUCHDOWN for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill-up. And you'll get cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code Touchdown for 25 cents per gallon or more in your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 or $300 a year in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app today and use promo code Touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon or more on your cash back on your first tank. Again, that's promo code Touchdown on the Get Upside app. We're also brought to you by BetOnline.net. There might be less football being played right now, but BetOnline.net has way more stuff to bet on in the Super Bowl. From scores, totals, to player performances, props, and all the different things that you need to know about where the next fired head coach is going to get hired. BetOnline is the number one spot for betting all things in the NFL. It's not just football. BetOnline.net has basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, odds, and coverage, and is the best in the business. From sports right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is your number one online wagering destination. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports and play your favorite games. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, Jenna, let's talk more about this quarterback situation. As we know, you got the big scoop that they're looking at quarterbacks. No one in the world knew that was coming. We just who would have thought that was a thing? We didn't talk about that for like years or something. But in all seriousness, Kenny Pickett is a local favorite, obviously, and I got to cover Kenny Pickett. One of the main drawbacks that a lot of the people who are pushing back against Kenny Pickett is his hands, because he's supposed to have a small hand size. He didn't get his hands measured at the Senior Bowl. This is becoming a thing. But there's another quarterback who's doing pretty well right now in the NFL who just went through his NFL draft process with small hands. I can't remember his name though right now, Jenna. Can you?
Does he happen to be representing the AFC as the quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl? Is that who I'm thinking of?
That guy.
Joe Burrow, maybe?
Joe Burrow. Yeah, that guy.
Definitely small hands have held him back. No doubt about that.
Yeah, it's something to measure, it's something to monitor, because small hands can, prevent gripping the football as well as you want. And there could be, and one thing that I think is for sure that very few people are the mad scientists that have figured out the quarterback position and will know every year who is the best quarterback of each class. There's guys who you could say have the strongest arm. That this year, that's Carson Strong. There's guys you could say are the fastest this year. That's Malik Willis. There's guys that you could say is the best decision maker this year. I'd say that's Kenny Pickett. But who combines all their skills the best? And that's what the Steelers are trying to do right now, Jenna. Again, I've even advocated this might not even be the year to take a quarterback. For the Steelers, that this year might be about, hey, beef up the offensive line, sign a quarterback in free agency, and see what happens. And then next year, if like C.J. Stroud comes out or Bryce Young comes out, you trade up and you go get one of those guys. But there's a lot of all the quarterbacks in this year's class. There's drawbacks to each of them, and I think that's what everyone's kind of muddling about right now.
Yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of apprehension, and understandably so, because again, this was kind of the talk of college football all year, was that, this year's draft class in terms of quarterback, it wasn't going to be the, 2017 class of like Mayfield and Josh Allen and Lamar, all those guys. It wasn't going to be that draft class where you had, the pick of the litter in terms of which quarterback you wanted when you were drafting. It's a lot more limited, and not that these guys aren't incredibly talented, because they are, but it's not the position group you're looking at saying, oh my God, that is so unbelievably overwhelmingly strong. That's just not the case. There's a lot of talent. Again, Kenny Pickett, guys like Pickett, Malik Willis, Sam Howell, but they're not that they're in my mind, and maybe it will happen. Maybe they will go higher, but it's not like a quarterback's going to go first overall, or at least as of right now. Again, things can change, but at least it doesn't entirely feel that way.
Right, and this year, I mean, it's quarterbacks have gone first overall a lot over these times, but we have those years where quarterbacks just aren't valued as high because they don't see any of them as the clear cut, got to get this guy and make him the difference maker to change the franchise type of player.
Yeah. It seems kind of like a lot of these guys are like, oh yeah, you could definitely find a lot of solid talent. They could be a good addition. If it falls to a certain team, there's guys that fall maybe into the second round. It could be like, okay, you get some of these guys for a steal, but it's not that highly touted, oh my God, the top 5 teams that need quarterbacks, these guys are going to go, second, fourth, fifth, seventh overall type thing.
Right. And we've seen interesting reports from people who have been there about the days. Like the first day of practice, most of the quarterbacks didn't play well. It was rough. The second day of practice, they said Malik Willis looked like, I saw reports saying that Malik Willis took the best steps forward, that he did really well. I saw Jordan Reed of ESPN tweeting out that Malik Willis really took a step forward with his accuracy and processing the field. I also read Kenny Pickett struggled on a rainy day. They had some elements and he didn't do too well. And what I encourage people to remember with these is that these are very small sample sizes, and that it's important. These are important days because these are important evaluations, and you want to see how a player prepared for a big moment that could help define their career, but not to change up your entire perspective on a guy that you built on with all your analysis or all just the tape that you watched over the time based off of that one moment. Now add it to the pile. If it ends up being the one thing that tips aside that had a lot of other information on it, that's one thing. But like for example, I look at Kenny Pickett. Some people are wondering when is he struggling because he can't live up to the moment? I'm like, can I tell you how many times Kenny Pickett lived up to the moment for Pitt this season, whether it was going up against one of the nation's best defenses or in Clemson, or whether it was in the ACC championship or to get the Steelers to the ACC, the Panthers to the ACC championship, beating top ranked quarterbacks like Sam Howell, like Brennan Armstrong of Virginia, who will be in next year's class and look really good. I want to remind people that's something to consider here. But of all, there's 6 quarterbacks that are on the roster. Sam Howell of North Carolina is on that list. Howell was coming in, was a Heisman favorite. He fell off. I'm a little less on Howell. I think he's a tough guy. I think he's certainly got the mettle to play in the NFL. I'm just not so sure if you combine his accuracy and consistency in processing the field that he's who the Steelers want.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's kind of the tough ones because I've seen a couple, again, mock draft season is already upon us. Hold your breaths, people. But I've seen a couple ones already from some high-ranked people that have Howell at 20 going to the Steelers. And I'm like, and again, it's going to depend on who's there. And, obviously we'll talk about this until we're blue in the face as we can continue to progress in the offseason. But, it's going to be, I don't see him being the fit. You and I were talking a little bit before we recorded, but obviously again, they really know what they have in terms of Kenny Pickett. They know what they can get from him. They're going to see a lot more of him in weeks to come, obviously through the Senior Bowl, through this game, through the combine. But a guy like Malik Willis is kind of intriguing, and it might be a little bit for some Steelers fans like, oh, he's intriguing because I don't know too much about him. But with what he did, I mean, he rushed for over 2,000 yards. Was that last year? And then, or 2 years. Yeah. Or was it, I'm looking at stats wrong. Was it 2,000 yards this past season or 2,000 yards in the last 2 seasons?
I think it's the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, 2,000 yards, 48 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons combined. So this guy clearly, we've talked about him kind of being that compilation of mobility, but also the arm strength. And is he going to be kind of the quote best bang for your buck in that sense with what he brings to the table? And it's kind of funny because everybody on Twitter with the initial report, who's the one I don't want to miss?
Thor Nystrom.
Yes. So he had the initial report came out that says, the Steelers really, really, really like Malik Willis. And it's funny because I feel like everybody did this last year where it's like, oh my God, they love this guy. It was with Najee. They're like, oh my God, they're talking to Najee. Oh my God. Like they're not trying to keep it a secret in a sense. Like they're going to have these conversations and there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to be like, hey, these people are talking right now. Here's a photo of them on the field after practice chatting.
Yeah. And because again, if you paid attention to stuff like that before, people knew about Najee Harris. People knew they liked Devin Bush. People knew they liked Pat Freiermuth. It's just the Steelers, they've been very upfront about it. But here's my thing about that for people that are like, well, that's terrible. That's a terrible idea. Why are the Steelers doing that? It's worked for the last 3 guys. For those 3 guys, all of them are on their roster right now. Yep. And I have to think that the Steelers, they've been an organization that's been prepared for when, other teams have tried to mess with them or do things, like a lot of people wanted them to get an inside linebacker the year that they drafted TJ Watt, and then they went and got TJ Watt and made everyone look stupid and say like that was the guy we wanted, and he's now the best defensive player in football. And not every Steelers pick works, but they have their systems, they have their practices that I think that they're taking into account. And I think it says a lot that they brought not just Tomlin, not just Colbert, but like you said, Matt Canada, Art Rooney, everybody's there, and they're trying to figure out because, quarterback, it's not just about, how you play, it's who you are. It's the kind of leader that you're going to be for the team. They want to make sure if they draft one in the first round, it's got to be a guy who's legit. And Jenna, another thing to consider here, there's going to be a lot of teams ahead of them that probably are going to try to take a shot at quarterback. Whether you're looking at the Detroit Lions with the second overall pick, though some people peg them for having, wanting to get an edge rusher with that. You could look at the Carolina Panthers. You could look at, maybe the Atlanta Falcons if they're tired of Matt Ryan. Maybe the Denver Broncos if they don't get anybody outside of Drew Lock and they're if in the offseason. The Washington football team at 11, that's a prime spot for, I think, a lot of these types of players. I wouldn't rule out the Eagles have been rumored to be considering for that. And then also 2 picks before the Pittsburgh Steelers is the New Orleans Saints, who absolutely do need a quarterback. That's a lot of teams to have to go through. But I want to remind people, the Steelers, when they do this kind of stuff, I mean, there was video of Mike Tomlin talking to Justin Fields, last year going into that draft. The Steelers are doing their due diligence. We're going to talk to these guys, see who these guys are. Even if we don't draft them, we want that relationship. We want them to know that we're for real and that we admire them and we've studied them and we're paying attention. So that if the day comes when they are on a roster, they remember us and they're like, hey, we appreciated that interaction. And that's an important thing to be doing, even if you're not going to be able to get that guy.
Absolutely. And we hear all the time too afterwards, guys that the Steelers have relationship with that when they become free agents, it's like, hey, Pittsburgh might be an option because I remember this really good talk I had with Mike Tomlin. Tomlin remembers, hey, we really liked that guy. We hear that kind of consistently. Did that happen with, God, was that Taco Charlton?
Yes, Taco Charlton? Mika Fitzpatrick talked about how that was a big thing for him when he was like, I remember talking to these guys.
Yep. So it's like, again, too, if this isn't potentially, again, they're doing this with a lot of the guys that they could be potentially interested in, and guys that, you want to foster these relationships. That's kind of what it all comes down to. And, these guys remember those things. So if it doesn't, if they're not getting this guy this year, there's a chance, in 2, 3, 4, however many years down the road, when there's a potential they become a free agent or there's a potential to get traded, they're like, hey, I remember these guys. I remember this relationship I had with them. It was a mutual, we liked them, they liked us type thing. Now it might work.
It's certainly something to keep track of. Yeah, it's not that the Steelers are definitely going to be taking a quarterback here, but they're also definitely looking to see, hey, because what would you be if you didn't take a look at quarterbacks because you assumed none would be there, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there at 20 and like, oh man, Kenny Pickett's there, or Malik Willis is there, or Sam Howell is there, and we could use a quarterback, but did we talk to him? They're going to do everything they can to be ready for that moment.
Yeah, leave no stones unturned, as we hear from head coach Mike Tomlin a lot about the game, but also in terms of, the draft process.
Absolutely.
It fits well.
It does, because that's how they operate. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to keep talking about this Senior Bowl, because I know the other position that a lot of Steelers fans want to hear about is the offensive line. There's plenty in this game, but there's a few we're going to pick out for you to keep your eye on in this game especially. So we'll talk about that in a second. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Built Bar. It's the New Year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your New Year's resolution because they taste so good, they'll make you want to eat them, unlike those other protein bars that can be chalky, waxy, or just taste downright nasty. If you want to eat healthy, it often gets so boring. By week 3, you're sitting around saying, where's the chocolate? Well, Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Most Built bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your average candy bar that has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. That's a much healthier option. And so you should go to built.com right now, find all the different flavors, and you can buy however many you want, stash them, make those your snacks that you're going to while you're trying to eat right, instead of those nasty junk foods. They're gonna waste your diet and make you have to start all over. So even if you're not a huge fan of Built bars yet, I guarantee you will be when you try out the different flavors that are available to you on Built.com. You can find peanut butter brownie, mint brownie, salted caramel, cookies and cream, raspberry, coconut almond, doubles chocolate. There's so many flavors available to you if you go to Built.com right now, and they're always adding more. When you go to Built.com, be sure to use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order of Built bars. Again, go to Built.com to order your Built bars by using promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter here with Jenna Harner, wrapping things up. So let's talk about some of the offensive linemen that are here in the Senior Bowl. Now, the obvious guy that everyone's talking about this year is Tyler Lindenbaum, the center from Iowa, the star center. But this guy's going. If he does not go in the first 19 picks, he will go 20 because the Steelers are taking him. And when you're a player like that, you don't have much to prove. And so Tyler Lindenbaum ain't at the Senior Bowl. Just like Aiden Hutchinson isn't at the Senior Bowl. So you're going to have a situation. All of these guys, these are guys that are like in that area where they're not surefire top 10 picks or top 15 picks, but these are the guys trying to play their way up. Now, I think it's important to note that of the other center prospects out there, guys that definitively played center, Lindenbaum is the clear number one. And after him, you start to get into the range of maybe this guy works, maybe this guy doesn't, maybe he needs a couple years. So I think Steelers fans should be wary of that. But there are several offensive linemen who fit the build of, if you want to build a physical, big, strong, athletic group, that they can be part of what you're looking at here. So guys that you should be paying attention to, Steelers fans. One is Zion Johnson, Boston College, 6'3", 300 some pounds. This guy's big, he's strong, he's athletic, he moves out the guard. He played a little bit of tackle at Boston College. So, Mike Tomlin loves that diversity in a guy. We've seen reports that he's been one of the guys the Steelers have taken harder looks at. He's a guy that, if you look at the Draft Network and other places, they're saying he projects to be a late first round type of player. That could be a person that the Steelers take a look at because they want strong people in the middle of their offense. They liked Kevin Dotson's rookie season. He was hurt up this past year, but they want to be able to say, hey, like, here's 5 guys that you line up with. They're going to go take charge. They're going to go push people up. They built their last great offensive line off of Marquise Pouncey and David DeCastro, a center and a guard, who were first-round picks. And even though they got Marquise Pouncey first, I think it's important to remember, Jenna, that you can still get a top-tier guard, and it really changes everything. Look at what Quentin Nelson did for the Colts. Granted, he was like the all-in-ahead, the best guard in football in that class.
100%. But again, we go back to the Steelers wanting to improve the running game, knowing who they have at running back and the talent that Najee Harris has. You get a guy like that, you bring a talent in where, obviously maybe it's not going to be the top guy, but it's a guy that's very solid and can say, hey, we are going to create this offensive identity. We know, we've heard from so many people in terms of, Art Rooney II, when he talked with select members of the media last week, saying they need to get better in the run. We heard Matt Canada say it. We heard Mike Tomlin say it in his end of postseason press conference. It's an obvious statement there, but this is an area they need to improve on. So you get a guy that has those capabilities, and it's like, hey, all right, like, we're going to keep kind of building this here. These are the building blocks of the foundation of what our offense is going to look like, knowing we're not entirely going to know who's under center. And something that's really interesting to me about Zion is the fact that, hey, in case you're wondering who he worked with really, really, really consistently pretty recently, you just got to go down the hall now to Pitt and their new offensive coordinator, Frank Cignetti Jr., who was at BC with the offense.
Yes, he was.
And with Johnson. So that having that relationship too. And obviously, all of it doesn't, you don't need me to tell you that all of these coaches and all the members of the staff on the Steelers, have guys on speed dial they can ask about Zion Johnson. But what better resource than right down the hall? Hey, give me the ins and outs of this guy. What can we expect with him? What do we like? What should we know? What should we, are there things we should be wary about? Those types of things. You have that information right inside your building right now.
You do. And that's one thing when you talk about no stones unturned in the last segment. This is exactly part of that scenario, is that you're talking to anybody that knows these guys or anybody that can give you insight on who they are as people. The Steelers don't just want talented guys. They want guys that are going to buy in, guys that are going to be leaders, guys that are going to set tones. And if you could get a guy, that's why they're talking to Malik Willis's family, for goodness sake. Like, they're not just talking to him. They're trying to figure out what makes this guy tick. What's his family like? What's been his motivation? What was he like as a kid? We want to know all these things and know who we're bringing into the locker room and who we're basing, who we want to be part of building the franchise forward after Ben Roethlisberger. And the same thing goes for offensive linemen. When they went and got, David DeCastro, they knew they were getting a stalwart guy. I mean, that was a situation where, if you remember that NFL draft and you were, following the Steelers, there was a story that came out that Keith Butler banged the table for them to go get Dante Hightower and said, no, let's go get this guy. And they declined that and said, hey, we're going to go get David DeCastro, because they knew they wanted his caliber of a guard on the offensive line. Now, other guys that fit the bill on the offensive line, other than Zion Johnson in this Senior Bowl, there's a few of them, but there's a lot of offensive tackles that I think a lot of people that the Steelers are going to take a look at. Now, the top guys aren't there. Ikem Ekwonu from NC State, Evan Neal from Alabama, Charles Clausen from Mississippi State. Those guys, they're too good. They're set. But the first guy that jumps off to me when I read these lists, when I saw that when I saw that Trevor Penning was there, I was like, okay, big Trevor Penning's in the house. Northern Iowa, 6'7", 321. This is a massive offensive tackle who can be a tone setter, and he's one of those guys that, I know some people say, because he played left tackle. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, well, wait a second. You have Dan Moore Jr. You don't want to draft the same position twice. Yes, you do, if you think he's going to be a game changer. And Trevor Penning is one of those guys in this class that I think a lot of people are projecting to go in the first round. Maybe not top 15 picks, but he might fall into that perfect slot where the Steelers can pick him in the first round. And then there's still, again, later rounds. Daniel Fa'alele from Minnesota. He's 6'8". He's a lot bigger, but he's well over 350. But if you look at a lot of guys, they want the strong guys up front. So they've been doing all week long. And this is something that you can do when you're watching clips of Senior Bowl practices. Watch who's going against who in reps. If they're going up against some of the better edge rushers, how did those offensive tackles do? Were they able to work? Were they able to use their size to still be quick enough to take on the speed rushers? Those are the things they're measuring, because they want to make sure whoever the quarterback is going to be, you're going to have an offensive line in front of you that's going to set a different tone they did in 2021.
Oh, absolutely. And just in terms of watching practice too, you get that perspective of, you see these guys, these are some of the best in terms of who's available going up against one another. How do they fare? Are they winning these matchups? Are they winning these battles? Not every time every guy is going to win everything. Of course not. But are they winning the majority of those one-on-one situations, those 7-shot situations? Are they really kind of able to be dominant, be dynamic in a way that catches your eye? And I feel like we're seeing a lot of that with some of these guys that kind of, you watch and you're like, oh my God, look what they can do against some of the top talent that's going to be going in, the first, second round, regardless. A lot of these guys, in terms of, I guess, the higher prospects, the Kenny Pickett's, the Malik Willis's, the Sam Howell, some of these offensive linemen, defensive linemen, things like that. These guys are going to be first, second picks. It's not like they're going to be the mid-round picks. Some of the ones here at the Senior Bowl might be, but, a lot of the talent here is got, guys going against each other that are probably going to go against each other on Sundays in the very near future.
Exactly. No, exactly. So that's certainly some of that there. We could go on and on about all the different prospects that are at the Senior Bowl, because there's a large list. Point is, watch the Senior Bowl, watch for the highlights, watch for the reports coming out of it. Then you'll start to see some more people grading players and seeing how they are, and a lot more different writers who are down in Mobile, Alabama, reporting on what their interactions were and what certain players said as they were talking about things. And sure, there's other guys too. Like I said, we could talk about Damari Mathis, the cornerback from Pitt, who's gonna be competing there. Mario Goodrich of Clemson. He's one of my favorite cornerbacks of this class to look at that could be, available to the Steelers. Maybe not in the, you want to take him in the early round, but maybe like when you start to get to those middle rounds, if he's still available. So there's a lot of different guys that you can watch here. We'll be talking about that all off season long. That's why I waited until the Friday before the Senior Bowl for us to start getting into it with Jenna here about the Senior Bowl prospects. So do pay attention to the Senior Bowl this weekend. We'll have some of our readouts of that. We'll talk about the Pro Bowl on Monday when we come back on Locked On Steelers on Monday. Najee Harris getting sent to the Pro Bowl, as well as Deontay Johnson, along with Cam Hayward and TJ Watt. So it became a little bit of a live event. So you might be able to see some Steelers highlights, just of them goofing off and doing things all week long in the Pro Bowl in Las Vegas. But Jenna's not headed to Las Vegas. She's headed back to LA. She's going to be at SoFi Stadium. She's going to be eating that good food and the kimchi rice and all the other stuff that she was showing off on her phone just a little bit. So Jenna, I am jealous of you in that opportunity.
Well, thank you. It's gonna be really awesome, and there's just so many cool local hometown ties. I mean, obviously Tyler Boyd with the Cincinnati Bengals, Clairton kid went to Pitt, Aaron Donald with the Rams, Penn Hill's kid went to Pitt. There's just so many awesome stories there. So there's a lot that we've been kind of doing leading up to it. We got some cool stuff at the Super Bowl too. TJ Watt being TJ Watt, and just as fantastic as he is, gifting a trip to the Super Bowl to a military family. So we'll be talking with him and the family he gifted the trip to out there as well. Just a whole lot of awesome stuff. So yeah, it'll be a crazy week, but it'll be really, really awesome. And I'll definitely have some good stories for you guys when I get back.
Definitely, we will look forward to hearing those stories when you get back from your trip. We also look forward to watching the content that you guys create for WPXI, doing all the great work that you do there. Jenna, thanks so much for joining us here on the Friday edition of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let me know you can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Well, thank you for having me, as always. Favorite part of Fridays. You can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner11, Instagram Jenna_Harner, and WPXI. All next week, we got a ton of stuff coming for you, so keep an eye out between Super Bowl and Olympics. Tons of wild stuff. Keep an eye out. I learned how to curl, so keep an eye out for that. But really, really awesome stuff. We have an awesome team that's been putting in a lot of work, so it'll be really cool.
Do check out. They do great work at WPXI Channel 11 here in Pittsburgh. Thank you, Jenna, for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can also subscribe to this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Be sure to like this video if you're watching it on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel for all of our daily content on your Pittsburgh Steelers. That's all we have for you this week. We will be off throughout the weekend. We'll be back on your screens and in your ears Monday, giving you more about what happened in the Senior Bowl, readouts on what's going on into the week, and more on your favorite team. We'll see you next week.